7 a.m, June 6, 1944, and you're one of the 150,000 troops embarking on a mission that would define the 20th century. Whether you knew it or not, this day would undoubtedly be the most demanding of your entire existence, when all the complexities, the horrors, the triumphs of human life would be laid bare, and courage and heroism would come to the fore. What all of your senses were exposed to on D-Day would stay with you forever.
Since the desperate evacuation of Allied forces from the northern French port of Dunkirk 4 years ago, plans of retaliation were made and slowly put in motion. From 1942 onwards, as the tide of the war was showing signs of turning, hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers, many from across the Atlantic, began to arrive in Britain to undertake training for a full-scale land, air and seaborne invasion of Europe, the largest of its kind in the history of warfare.
This would be an operation of epic proportions, yet to be rivaled in terms of its size, its scale and international cooperation. This would take meticulous research, intricate planning, cunning deception and immense sacrifice. Just what part you play on this historic day was yet to be determined.
With the fate of the world hinged on this moment, nothing could be left to chance. Whatever your name, age, rank or occupation, every man had a specific role to play in this great endeavour. But as is the nature of warfare, despite the years' organisation and preparation, not all would go to plan. In this episode, I was heading across the Channel as an Allied infantryman, ready to storm the beaches of Normandy. As part of an assault division, the first wave of troops to land across the numerous allocated sectors of coastline, I would find out how Allied soldiers prepared for this monumental operation.
We've got fake units, radio traffic, we've got fake tanks, inflatable tanks. It's a massive deception plan.
What they faced when they landed on the beaches.
That you've got these concrete emplacements on top and they're firing directly down with an MG42 straight onto the beach. It's killing zones, it really is.
And the sacrifices made to overcome and breach Hitler's infamous Atlantic Wall.
This thing is going to blast out of the ground and detonate. These are a nasty piece of work, okay? They're horrible. He who has 112 controls Normandy.
The question is, could you survive as an Allied soldier on D-Day? In the summer of 1942, with World War having raged for close to 3 years, the Allies launched their first significant raid on mainland Europe since the evacuation at Dunkirk. Disaster. 3,500 casualties, 2,000 prisoners of war, and a brutal lesson for Allied High Command. Despite the introduction of the United States into the conflict, an invasion of Europe was looking like a near impossible undertaking, but the clock was ticking. The Soviet Union continued to bear the brunt of the land war in Europe and was on the brink of losing its precious oil fields in the Caucasus. Over 5 million of its best men had already been lost, as well as most of its industrial capacity. Failure to open up a Western front soon might cost the Allies the survival of their closest and most formidable ally. By spring the following year, appointed Chief of Staff to Supreme Allied Command, Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan, was given the task of coordinating and driving forward plans for cross-channel operations this year and next. A string of important victories across the globe indicated that the tide of the war was beginning to turn. Nonetheless, within a month, the combined chiefs of staff decided that no operation could be mounted in 1943. The Allies, instead turning their immediate attention to a smaller scale invasion of Italy that summer, issued the final directive ordering Morgan to begin planning for a full-scale assault against the continent in 1944, as early as possible. But where was this assault to take place? There were many requirements. Number 1, the site had to be in range of Allied fighter planes based in Britain. Number 2, there had to be one major port close that could be taken from landside. Number 3, after the lessons of Dieppe, the site couldn't be a major port where Hitler's formidable Atlantic wall was complete. And number 4, the landing place should be as close as possible to the ultimate strategic objective of the Rhine-Ruhr region. This left a few options. The ports of Holland and Belgium, too close to Luftwaffe bases and an area easily flooded and defended. Le Havre, at the mouth of the Seine, was tempting, but to capture it, the Allies would have to land on both sides of the river. To the east was also a stretch of coastline dominated solely by cliffs, with very few beaches. Brittany was another option, with Brest as its main port. Distance from the objective was the main issue here, the area also vulnerable to stormy conditions arriving from the Atlantic. Moreover, it would be easy for the Germans to seal off the beachhead here. A process of elimination brought the choice down to the Calvados coast of Normandy. Not too far from the main English southern ports, the coastline here was protected from the worst effects of storms. The port of Caen, albeit small, could be captured within the initial assault, as well as its nearby airfield. The capture of Caen would also cut the transport links between Paris and Cherbourg, allowing the Allies to isolate the Cotentin Peninsula. Lastly, the 7th Army in the southwest, under the command of General Friedrich Dollmann, was significantly weaker than the Wehrmacht's 15th Army to the northeast, which had 5 panzer divisions to Dollmann's 1. With the location chosen, it was time to start planning. US General Dwight D. Eisenhower was appointed as Supreme Allied Commander on Christmas Eve in 1943, at which point hundreds of thousands of US troops had begun to arrive in England to commence training. Whilst remaining reticent with the details of the invasion plan, Allied Command made very clear the scale and difficulty of the challenge ahead.
So Dickie, good morning.
Good morning.
The Allies, at least certainly the High Command, in May 1943, they've decided on Normandy. That's going to be their place of landing. What can they expect at Normandy in terms of resistance? They know it's not going to be easy.
Essentially what you've got is you've got to breach Hitler's Atlantic wall. Defences that Hitler's put in between Norway and the Spanish border. And so they're bristling with all sorts of defences. You've got Czech hedgerows down on the beach, you've got minefields, you've got barbed wire, you've got gun emplacements, you've got artillery batteries, you've got all sorts of things. So it's going to be a very, very difficult task, literally, to get through that crust.
And he's put his trusted Field Marshal Rommel in charge of this project. And he's using a lot of POWs. This is a huge operation, as you said, all the way from Norway to the Spanish border. I mean, it takes a lot of concrete and manpower to build these defences.
Yes, Norway to to Spain. It's a long distance, okay? They don't know where the invasion's coming from. It could be coming in Norway. It could be coming in the part of Calais. It could be coming in somewhere in France. They don't know. We've got to keep the Germans guessing where we're coming from.
And that's a good point. You mentioned deception.
Right.
It's very much a part of this story, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We could land in Denmark. We could land, you know, in the south of France. How do we convince the Germans that we're not landing at Normandy?
Right. So, the obvious thing is to go Dover to the part of Calais. It's the shortest distance, it's the shortest supply lines, shortest lines of communication.
Yep.
That's the obvious choice. So we've got Operation Fortitude South and Fortitude North. We're trying to keep their troops pinned down in Norway and Denmark. And we're trying to convince them that we're going to go via the part of Calais, the shortest route. There's so much going on. It's a massive deception plan. We've got fake units. We've got radio traffic, we've got fake tanks, inflatable tanks. As the Germans are coming over, they're spotting these tanks, but they're just inflatable. They're rubber tanks. They're just apparitions.
And airfields as well?
Airfields, anything that we can convince the Germans we've got more troops in more areas that we actually have, so we can tie down their troops all over Europe.
And it's so not just fake vehicles. You mentioned there's a fake units. There's a fake
units. Yeah. So they even go down to the level of producing patches for their soldiers to wear. So what we've got here is a fake unit. It's the American 153rd Airborne. It doesn't exist.
So it goes to the level of detail of actually having people pretending and almost acting as if they're part of this completely made up bogus unit.
Indeed, it has to be believable. And so the idea behind these is you'd get certain people and they would be sewed on their uniform on the side there. You'd go out and they'd go out and be seen in public, seen in public places, in town, in cities, where there might be German spies.
And spies are very much part of this story as well. There's a bit of sort of double agent action going on, isn't there?
What we've got is something called the 20 Committee. And the whole purpose of the 20 Committee is to turn German agents on their masters. And we've got to get them on our side, and then we can feed them all sorts of nonsense to tell the German High Command about where the invasion's coming, what forces we've got. And that's the really beautiful thing. Also, what's 20 in Roman numerals?
XX.
XX. Or cross.
That should have been the first.
It's a double
giveaway.
cross, isn't it? It's obvious, isn't it? It's double cross.
Right, the 20 Committee.
The 20 Committee.
I'm surprised the Germans didn't cotton on to that earlier.
The remarkable efforts made to deceive those at the top of German high command were testament to the importance of retaining the element of surprise. Eisenhower and his staff nonetheless remained mindful of what lay at the core of the operation: manpower. 133,000 troops would need to be transported and swiftly unloaded onto the shores of Normandy in one morning, ready to be supported with reinforcements in the following hours and days. This in itself would be a considerable feat, especially considering the obvious predicament.
There's a big problem that they have, obviously, with carrying all these troops in these convoys across the Channel. Normandy, Arromanches, Long-sur-Mer, they're not deep water ports, are they? How do they get over this challenge?
Right. Okay, the big thing is, if you are bringing in an invasion force, you need to capture ports. And so the Germans know this. And so the Germans are really putting their defences on the deep water ports. So places like Cherbourg and Le Havre, places like that, because the Germans know that we will need to have a port so we can supply our forces when they actually land. And that's really crucial. But we've got ace up the sleeve. We don't need to capture a deep water port straight away. We're going to bring our own. It's the most incredible thing going. Something called the Mulberry harbours, a prefabricated harbour that we can bring with us. And essentially what it is, it's like building blocks. It's built all over southern Britain. And it's brought across these great big huge concrete floating blocks, bring it over, and we'll slot it all together. In fact, it's not just one harbour, it's two harbours. Mulberry A, Mulberry B.
So these Mulberry harbours, they're literally being tugged across the channel by these battleships. What kind of materials being used?
Well, they're recycling all sorts of stone. Remember, it's wartime. Okay, we need to recycle anything we possibly can do. And so we've got bits of concrete, bits of stone, bits of medieval church that have been bombed, or old buildings or whatever.
Oh, really? From the Blitz?
Aye.
Wow, incredible. So they're using anything they can to create these huge harbours.
Make do and mend, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. Now talk to me a bit about the beaches themselves. You obviously have the Mulberry harbours just off the coast of Arromanches.
Yes.
How are the beaches delegated?
Right,
Let's get into
okay.
the nitty gritty.
All right, so, okay, what we've got, going from east to west, we've got Sword Beach, which is a British beach. We've got Juno Beach, which is a Canadian beach.
Okay.
We've got Gold, again, British. And then we move into the American sector. We've got Omaha, we've got Utah, and we've got a place called Pointe du Hoc, which is one that the Rangers are going to capture, the American Rangers.
Oh yeah, that's the huge cliffs that they have to scale.
Yes.
Right, okay. So the British and the Commonwealth and Canadian troops, they're to the east. US troops are to the west. But they're just the troops landing on the crafts by sea. Obviously, before that, we have a lot more going on, don't we?
Yes.
Troops landing by parachute or glider in the early hours of the morning would play a critical role, seizing causeways, connecting the beaches to inland reinforcements, and securing or destroying bridges, which could be used to resupply the German lines. Targeting enemy supply networks from the air were RAF bombers, dropping over 76,000 tons of bombs on weapon and equipment depots, road and railway networks, by the time D-Day had commenced. The bombardment would not stop at that. Over 1,200 warships were amassed to obliterate the coastline before troops were transported to the beaches, targeting German gun emplacements, bunkers and beach obstacles. Also helping the Allies was the French resistance, on standby, waiting for the signal to disrupt communication lines, railways, and hinder the German army in any way possible. All of this was enormously encouraging for the soldiers, who alone would be carrying a mini arsenal of weapons and equipment to take the fight to the occupying forces.
Right, Dickie, as much as I'd love to stand around drinking a good old cup of tea all day, how about we put these down and take a look at some of the kits that we have here for the British soldiers who were landing on the beaches. Talk to me about some of the stuff that they would have been using.
Right, so it's a seaborne invasion, so you're going to need a life vest.
Right, okay.
That goes over your head, and that gets tied.
And the soldiers would have been wearing this on the landing craft?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's essentially, it's an inflatable life belt. You breathe into there, you blow it up. It's rubbish. It is the most rubbish piece of kit going, okay? It's what you'll see as you're fully loaded, okay? That won't keep you afloat. It was issued purely for, well, almost purely for psychological reasons.
Psychological reassurance.
To make them feel that they've got some health and safety kit.
And what is this big old piece of kit here?
Okay.
That's going on my back, isn't it?
It is. Right, let's bung this on.
Wow, that's heavy.
What we've got here is the 1942 battle jerkin. It was designed to replace webbing, and it was invented by a chap called Colonel Rivers Macpherson. And he wanted to get away from this stuff here, which is the webbing system, and produce a jacket that did everything. So on the front here, we've got ammunition pouches. So these can carry all sorts of bits and pieces. Bandoliers of ammunition, smoke bombs, grenades, mortar bombs, you name it, they can get in there. In this side, we can get Bren gun magazines. Bren gun magazines, like this.
Wow. Big old hefty thing. This goes on top of this thing down here.
Yes, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So Okay, we've got 30 rounds in there. You don't ever put 30 rounds in there, just put 28 in, because otherwise it mucks up the springs. So we've got space for those in there. If you turn around, this side, we've got room for grenades. And in here, we've got fragmentation hand grenades, so things like the Mills bomb. There could be smoke grenades in there. There could be all sorts in there.
All sorts of tactile weapons,
Yes.
yeah.
Turn around, machete on the back. We've got the handle of an entrenching tool, the head of an entrenching tool down there. In the back here, we've got enough for a few days. So we've got rations, we've got a woolly jumper, we've got a wash kit, spare socks, a waterproof ground sheet.
And let me get this straight. They've got all of this on when they're storming beaches and facing German machine guns. Entrenching tools, machetes.
Everything you need. You're going to need all of this stuff. Okay, soldiers don't carry stuff they don't need. Everything you're carrying, you absolutely need. But the big problem with this battle jerkin is you can't take things off. It's an all or nothing type of thing, which is its major downfall. Okay, because if you need to fight light, you can't get rid of stuff.
Yeah, you can't just
Take
it off quickly.
Yeah, but it's a great idea and concept. But in practice, these were only used, for a few days after the landing. They were issued to the assault battalions as a great idea. But as soon as the soldiers got on land, they'd get a regular set of webbing that they could use and change and do what they wanted with.
So they ditched this pretty quickly. Let's move on to protection, head protection in particular.
Right, so the standard helmet of the British in the Second World War is this one here, the Mark II helmet. Essentially the same as a World War I helmet, different lining, different chin strap inside.
With a bit of camouflage.
On top. And your first field dressing bandage underneath the net there. If you're a assault battalion, they've introduced a brand new type of helmet, one with more protection. So what you've got here is this one. This is called the Mark III, or the turtle helmet.
Right.
Issued to assault battalions in Normandy, and it's a much better helmet. So if you look at it, it slopes down at the back, it gives the head more protection at the back. It's a much better design. The British Army continued with this design with a different liner up until the early 1980s. So it's in there for a long, long time.
So I whack this on, yeah, I can definitely feel this, the bit at the back does go further down the neck, gives you more protection, a bit similar to the sort of German style helmets.
Yeah, more protection around the back there.
Yeah. Before we talk about weapons, are they carrying anything else on them?
They might be carrying a shovel or a pickaxe down their back. They might be carrying extra ammunition. They might be carrying a folding bicycle. You see many troops going in with a folding bicycle. Many soldiers said as soon as they got into the water, they ditched that thing straight away. It's a hindrance. Get rid of this thing, this nonsense. Okay, ditch it in the water. And anti-gas kit. All soldiers will be carrying one of these things here, okay? And what this is here is the new lightweight gas mask.
They really think the Germans might be using gas on the beaches?
Well, why not? Yeah, it's a distinct possibility.
Well, it's an extra bit of protection, but all it is to me is another layer of kit that I have to carry. I'd obviously also be carrying a weapon. What sort of weapons are the British soldiers bringing on the beaches?
So your standard weapon for your British infantry is this here, the No. 4 Lee Enfield rifle. Essentially, it's the same weapon as they were using in World War I, but it's been simplified and it's been made easy to mass produce. Okay. We've got to make hundreds of thousands of these and to get as many as possible.
But apart from perhaps a few changes in the mechanism, you've got the same amount of rounds in there.
Yeah, so
magazine.
You've got 10 rounds in the magazine, bolt action. So essentially what happens is, it's the same with the World War I rifle. Bring it open, you'll put 2 charges in there, 10 rounds in there, so 5 and 5 in there, goes into the magazine, this magazine that comes out here. Close it up, and then fire it off, reload, eject the empty case, etc.
It's interesting that a lot of the other nations, they've moved on to perhaps semi-automatic rifles, but the British stick with their good old Lee Enfield. Don't fix what ain't broke.
It's trustworthy, it's reliable, it's a good weapon.
But obviously, they've brought in some other weapons as well. Let's talk a bit about this huge machine gun here. This has a really good reputation, is that fair to say?
Yes, okay, so what we've got here is the Bren light machine gun. And as you know, a light machine gun, it's not exactly light, is it?
No.
It's designed on the Czech machine gun. And so Bren gun is a shortening of Bruno and Enfield, the two companies where it comes from. So light machine gun, essentially what you've got here is you've got a 30 round box magazine. Okay, as I said before, you don't ever put 30 rounds in there, it's always 28, otherwise it jams up the springs inside. Yep. That goes down, sights come up, and the way you cock it is the cocking handle comes backwards like that, push it forwards, you get down behind it.
Lay prone.
Yeah, lay down, and bring it up into the shoulder, like this.
And it's interesting that they've got the magazine on top of the rifle. Is this one of the first weapons where we see that?
Not really, no, because you've got things like the Lewis gun, and that's got a drum magazine on top. Essentially what you're using is gravity to feed a spring and gravity to bring the bullets down into it, and they just eject out the bottom underneath it.
So it was a conscious decision that this would be preferable to the magazine underneath?
Yes.
Right, okay. And what would this be used for? Where would you need a Bren gun as opposed to your Lee Enfield? It's obviously got a far quicker fire rate, but where would you be using this on the battlefield?
Okay, it's essentially the light support weapon of its day, and so it gives the section a much greater firepower. So every section will be armed with a Bren gun. Essentially, you've got a Bren gun team under the control of a lance corporal, and so you'll have the Bren gun number 1, who's the gunner, and then you've got the number 2 who's carrying the spare parts and extra ammunition. Every soldier will carry part of the Bren gun ammunition.
Right.
And so what happens is when you come under fire, the number 2 Bren gunner will go around the section, picking up magazines of every person in the section, and so you've got a supply of ammunition straight away ready for it.
With weapons and equipment weighing over 50 kilograms, the troops landing on all sectors would need months of training to improve their fitness and get to grips with their specific objectives. The first major amphibious training exercise for US troops began at Slapton Sands in the first few days of 1944, as part of Exercise Tiger, the code name for the preparations. A fine balance between maintaining anonymity and providing a realistic replication of conditions for the soldiers had to be struck. More than once, things went wrong. Incidents of friendly fire led to hundreds of casualties, and on the morning of the 28th of April 1944, a convoy of 8 LSTs carrying vehicles and combat engineers of the 1st Engineer Special Brigade was attacked by German E-boats in Lyme Bay, leading to the death of 749 servicemen. As June approached, rumours of an imminent launch date could not be contained. Not least because by now, all troops landing at Normandy were stationed in camps along the south coast of England. Eisenhower had moved his command post to Portsmouth, and the first convoys began to be loaded. All was prepared, with the first submarines and warships ready to make their way across the Channel. On the 1st of June, the first part of a poem by Paul Verlaine was broadcast by the BBC, a coded message for the French resistance relating to plans to carry out railway sabotage and a warning that the invasion would take place within a month.
Ici Londres. Les Français parlent aux Français. Veuillez écouter tout d'abord quelques messages personnels. Les sanglots longs des violons de l'automne. Je répète, les sanglots longs des violons de l'automne blessent mon cœur d'une langueur monotone. Je répète, blessent mon cœur d'une langueur monotone.
What mattered now was out of the Allies' control.
Good weather was critical if an Allied operation was to be successful. The airborne divisions required clear skies and a full moon for good nighttime visibility. The Navy required low winds and calm seas to safely transport troops ashore. And the troops on the ground, they needed to land at low tides, when the German beach obstacles were exposed and hence easier to deal with.
That's why Eisenhower had a dedicated team of meteorologists, led by Ground Captain James Stagg, whose sole responsibility was to accurately predict weather conditions for the assault. With no satellites, radar or modern computer models, Stagg's team used a number of tools to measure temperature, humidity, precipitation and cloud cover. They had rehearsed for months, preparing trial forecasts, which would be checked for accuracy as the weeks progressed.
In the days before Operation Overlord, which was originally planned to commence on the 5th of June, a problem arose. Stagg and his team predicted that the weather conditions would worsen. Gale-force winds and heavy rain in the Channel. This gave the Allied commanders no choice. On the 4th of June, the decision was made to postpone.
This decision was not taken lightly. Any delay made it increasingly difficult to keep the operation a secret, and if the weather did not improve, D-Day would have to be postponed until the tides were again in the Allies' favour, which would not happen for another 2 weeks. Another 2 weeks in which Hitler could beef up his Atlantic wall defences, adding to Allied casualties. Unbeknownst to the Allies at the time, the German forecasters had also predicted stormy weather until mid-June, resulting in many soldiers leaving their posts on the beaches and taking part in war games in Rennes. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, one of Hitler's most senior and trusted military commanders in charge of the German coastal defences in France, had also read the weather reports. Suitably reassured, he had set off back to Hurlingen in southern Germany for his wife Lucy's birthday, which happened to be on the 6th of June. At 4:15 on the 5th of June, Allied commanders met with the meteorological team. The night before, a 36-hour break in bad weather conditions had been predicted. It would not be perfect, but should allow airborne and naval operations to take place. The decision was made. D-Day would go ahead the next morning.
At this point, junior officers burst open their sealed orders, which showed the precise location of the landings, and the first troop convoys were loaded. The US divisions from Falmouth to Weymouth, the British and Canadian troops from Southampton to Portsmouth.
Everything was on the move, and had been since the beginning of June. Jeeps, trucks, big artillery pieces, tanks, half-tracks, motorcycles and bicycles. Crowds swarmed the streets to watch the never-ending procession.
Almost everyone who came to wave the soldiers off was giving the V for victory sign. But as one company of the 1st Division was marching through a coastal town, a boy around the age of 11 or 12 cried out to the sergeant, "You won't come back!" Now, at this point, the boy's mother gasped and grabbed her child and ran to the front of the column, and as the sergeant passed, you can imagine the child with tears streaming down his face said, "You will come back, you will." Now, I find this story particularly poignant because children, as they often do in their innocence, reveal the elephant in the room.
Death was on the mind of many men. As one private remembered on his bus ride to disembark from Dartmouth.
Few words were spoken among us. No joking or prankster stunts. We felt closer to each other now than ever before.
A few commanders gathered their men for some final words before they boarded their transport vessels. As soldiers filed onto their landing craft, they were handed an order of the day from General Eisenhower. It read,
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Dickie, it's almost impossible to try and put yourselves into the mind frame and into the shoes of the soldiers who had disembarked from Portsmouth and making their way towards Normandy. What would have they been feeling? I'm assuming you've got a bit of a mixture. You've got some extremely nervous, almost sick to their stomach, but I'm assuming that there's some others who are eagerly anticipating. They've been training for so long.
There's so many different emotions kicking around here. Fear, whatever's going to happen. Am I going to get wounded? Am I going to get, a leg blown off or whatever? But they keep on referring back to their training. They have done this. They have rehearsed this again and again and again. This is the crescendo. This is the moment. This is the point where that training comes into action.
So it's almost like an amalgamation of all those emotions all at once. I mean, that in itself is probably enough to make you seasick if these landing crafts didn't do the job anyway.
Indeed.
And of course, they're given an almighty speech from the Supreme Commander, Dwight Eisenhower. It's almost like something out of Shakespeare, isn't it?
It's like a Henry V, isn't it? It's to spur them on. It's, before most battles, before most soldiers go into combat, they'll have a speech or a chat.
A rallying call
from their commanding officer. And it's to fire them up. It's to fire them, tomorrow you're going into action. The crescendo of what we've been training for. This is it, lads. We're going for it now.
And in that message himself, Eisenhower, he doesn't beat around the bush. He warns them that this is going to be an almighty challenge, that the Germans will have prepared for this. There's going to be casualties. It's going to get really messy, but they have to keep faith in the mission. And so this is it. This is the time. And let's do a bit of myth busting here. There's a theory that goes around that some of the men, they would have pulled straws from a hat to decide what waves they would have been in. Let's debunk that right now. The soldiers in the first wave, they knew they were going to be the first ones going ashore, and they were specifically trained and equipped for that.
Yes, the soldiers in the first wave would be assault battalions.
Okay.
They are specifically trained for this role. They know what the role is, to get through those defences, cut through that Atlantic wall and get through there. By and large, they would be experienced. You would have had decent troops that could be trusted to get on and do the job. The kit would have been better, so the kit would have been specialist assault rigs that you're wearing yourself there, specialist helmets, etc.
And they would have been accompanied by the UDTs, the underwater demolition teams, and engineers, and their job is to get rid of these obstacles.
You've got engineers dealing with the defences, diffusing the mines, getting clear in the mines. After that, the idea was to bring in Hobart's funnies, tanks which have been specially modified to break through the Atlantic Wall. So you've got Churchills with flails on the front to deal with mines. You've got the Crocodile, which is a flamethrower tank, a really psychological weapon there.
Yeah.
Many different designs. You've got ones with great big huge fascines on top, big bundles of sticks to roll into any kind of ditches. We've got some great equipment, and that's just the tanks. We've got amphibious tanks. We've got DD tanks, so duplex drive tanks, or Donald Duck.
Donald Duck tanks, yes.
Yeah. The assault troops will also be carrying things such as the Bangalore torpedo to get through barbed wire entanglements.
Yes, you see that in Saving Private Ryan.
Yes.
That was to basically break the barbed wire so they didn't have to go over it.
Yeah. So you've got sections of pipe which are filled with explosive, and you can just push them underneath and keep on adding another one and another one and another one, and you push them in under the defences and set it off, and you can blast a hole through the defences, and then our troops can fly through those into the next objective.
So the theory is that the assault battalions and the tanks, they clear the way as best as they can before the lighter infantry come in, probably in more numbers.
Yes, so again, lots will be landing on things called landing ship infantry, LSIs, and you've got over 200 troops on those, about a company size, all on one ship going straight down. Okay, and you've got the LCAs, okay, which you've got about 38 men on board there, basically a platoon size, and they're defended. They're armed. The boats have got armament on them. You've got a Bren gun on the back, possibly 2 Lewis guns, and they're designed to get into the beach, lower that ramp down, as you see in Saving Private Ryan, and storm the beaches.
So the LCAs, the landing craft assault vehicles, they carry less troops, but they're designed to be the ones who land the assault battalions. Then you've got the slightly less well defended big troop carriers, the LSIs. But you also have another type of landing craft, don't you?
There's a whole host of landing craft. Possibly a very famous one is the landing craft tank. And so again, these can be brought in. They've got some good armaments on as well. So some are fitted with rockets that they can fire into the fences as they land.
They're absolutely gigantic, aren't they?
Huge things, you've also got the landing ship tank, the LSTs, okay? And these were famous, being a massive, great big ship. They're known as large stationary targets, kind of almost darkly by their people going on board them.
Well, we're certainly throwing almost everything we can at the Germans. It's amazing to hear about all the different types of landing craft, the different innovative weapons that we have. But just going back to what the soldiers were feeling, I guess there's one thing we haven't mentioned is they know that before they land, Hitler's Atlantic Wall has taken a battering, whether that's from the bombers who have been bombing the coast and the infrastructure in the days before, or whether it's the huge guns from those battleships in the early hours of the morning.
We've got the ships bombarding the coast, but the night before we send in airborne troops to take out the flanks. Okay, so on the left-hand flank we've got the British 6th Airborne Division, and their objectives are things such as Pegasus Bridge, Horsa Bridge, the Merville Battery, that sort of thing. On the other side, 101st Airborne, 82nd Airborne as well. And so they're taking out that flank. So essentially what you're doing is you're boxing off Normandy.
Yeah.
You're boxing off those beaches. So our troops can land in there and push in without worry of troops coming in from the side.
So it gives them, if anything, a bit of peace of mind that they know this is a combined operation. A lot of work has been done before they land.
In the hours before the assault battalions embarked on their landing craft, the US 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, along with the British 6th Airborne, had secured their objectives. Despite navigational errors, heavy anti-aircraft fire and flooded terrain, the target bridges had been captured, along with the town of Sainte-Mère-Église, a village on the main road linking Caen to Cherbourg, and a likely route for a German counterattack. The lack of any real threat from the Luftwaffe, which mainly operated around Germany on defensive missions by this point in the war, certainly had improved their prospects. The operation's chances of success were also bolstered by the fact that the Führer Adolf Hitler was still asleep. As early as 2:30 AM, news had been received of fighting in Normandy, but under Hitler's orders, nobody was to wake him for any reason, and hence no reserves were mobilised. He wouldn't wake up until midday. A few hours after the paratroopers had landed, the big guns from the battleships opened up. HMS Warspite and Ramillies, USS Arkansas, Nevada and Texas, first targeting the beaches and then specific targets inland. Any German defenders who were not yet aware of the armada approaching across the channel were now certainly alert to the imminent threat. Alan Snowden, aboard HMS Rodney, recalled the bombardment.
The sheer volume of the noise, the blast of the guns was incredible. You could feel it through your body, even if you were quite a distance from the gun actually doing the firing. You couldn't help feeling a bit sorry for the guys on the receiving end.
It was like the firework display of 1,000 Fourth of Julys rolled into one.
As the bombardment gradually came to a halt, the LCAs and tank craft were halfway to the beaches. By 6:30 AM on Omaha and Utah, US troops were in sight. A little later, at 7:25 AM, British troops prepared to land.
As the ramp was about to be lowered, soldiers of the assault battalions were about to come face to face with the might of Hitler's Atlantic Wall for the first time. 10 seconds! What sort of resistance would they face? Well, that depended entirely on what beach you were landing on. The British assault battalions landing at Sword Beach, they were met with a barrage of machine gun fire coming from the wreckage in the German towns and their dugout positions. That, along with mortar fire and artillery fire coming from the 88mm guns 2 kilometres inland.
Whilst underwater demolition teams and engineers dealt with obstacles, often under intense sniper fire, assault troops ran as fast as they could up the beach, laying down suppressive fire on enemy emplacements before taking cover behind the seawall.
A combination of the artillery fire, the mortars, the extensive minefields and the persistent machine gun fire made the jobs of the first and second waves an absolute nightmare. That's not to mention the extremely heavy kit that they almost certainly would have thrown off at the first chance they had. But for the commandos and infantrymen landing at Sword Beach, a few things gave them enormous encouragement. First of all, the RAF had spent the entire morning sheathing this beach with smokescreen, which not only temporarily blinded the enemy crews, but it affected the 155mm guns at Le Havre, which were already engaged in a one-on-one duel with HMS Warspite. The other big battery was that at Merville, but the 6th Airborne Division the night before had already taken that out of action. Arriving in support of the troops as well on the LCTs were the DD, Churchill and Sherman tanks, disguised and armed with 75mm cannons and 50 caliber machine guns. Bolstering the morale of the troops even more was the familiar and galvanising sound of bagpipes.
"21-year-old Bill Millin, the only bagpiper and kilted soldier in the entire Allied Armada, accompanied Lord Lovett's commandos as they fought their way up Sword Beach. Casualties were initially heavy, and some men were temporarily shocked into a state of helplessness. but most assault teams managed to make their way to the dunes, to the skirl of bagpipes, from which they could start laying down effective suppressive fire on the gun emplacements. Elsewhere, a number of Hobart's funnies had already managed to drop their bridges over the seawall, followed by bulldozers and fascine carrying tanks, which dropped bundles of logs into the anti-tank ditches. Progress was slow, the British and Commonwealth troops hindered by snipers and machine gun fire coming from Lines-sur-Mer, but the Germans were being pushed back. For those landing in other sectors, the situation was very different. Whilst the US soldiers landing on Utah and the British on Gold could not have wished for a smoother start to their campaign, the majority of troops simply able to jog or walk ashore with little resistance, the Canadians at Juno and Americans at Omaha entered hell on earth. On Juno, many troops were forced to jump off their LCAs into seawater up to their necks, with intense machine gun fire and 88mm rounds raining down from casemates and concrete trenches that seemingly hadn't been touched by the Allied bombardment. B Company of the Winnipegs was cut down to 1 officer and 25 men before it even reached the seawall. D Company of the Regina Rifles lost half its strength before it even reached the beach. 30 kilometres to the west, a nightmare was unfolding. A combination of mislandings, miscommunication, formidable German defences, and rotten luck led to a horrific situation on what became the bloodiest beach sector. This could not have been more apparent to the teams of medics battling their way through piles of bodies and blown off limbs to the seawall, which had become an overcrowded mass of wounded soldiers.
Face downward, as far as the eyes could see in either direction, were the huddled bodies of men living, wounded, and dead, as tightly packed together as a layer of cigars in a box. Everywhere, the frantic cry, "Medic, medic, medic!"
Within the first few hours of the assault, the Americans had suffered 2,000 casualties. It was a bloodbath.
Okay, Dickie, so we've secured the beachhead. Sword was perhaps not the worst beach in terms of casualties, but it certainly wasn't the best. What are the main differences between the beaches that the US and the Canadians and the British land on?
It absolutely depends on which beach you land on, depends on the characteristic of that beach and the defence of those beaches. So the Rangers, the US Rangers, are going in at Point de Hoc, and they've got these whopping great cliffs to scale to get to the artillery positions on top. You've got Omaha, sandy banks up and these bluffs, and the only way through is these kind of bluffs through. They're filled with kind of barbed wire, and they've got to get through them. So that's where the Bangalore torpedoes come in. But the trouble is that you've got these concrete emplacements on top, and they're firing directly down with the MG42 straight onto the beach. It's killing zones, it really is.
Bloody Omaha, they've got the flanking fire, haven't they? And they've got that the shingles as well. It's all a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Get out the shingle as quickly as possible. If you're lying on a bed of shingle, and some explosion goes off, you've got shrapnel, pebble shrapnel all over the place.
It's true, I didn't even think about that. And I get it's also uniquely one of the only times in history perhaps where to get the wounded to safety you have to bring them towards the enemy lines.
You've got a sea wall, okay, and you've got to push the wounded straight up towards the enemy, which is against everything you sort of possibly know. Straight in there towards the enemy so you can duck down underneath their fire.
And at this sea wall, I mean, what are they doing? They maybe giving them morphine. It's basic first aid, isn't it?
Stabilising the casualties as quickly as possible. Stop them dying out, okay? You're not doing intricate stuff there. You're stopping bleeding, you're giving pain relief, and you're getting them out of that fire as quickly as possible.
Problem there is that the landing craft's all over the place, isn't it? They can't get troops off that beach. That's why they suffer so many casualties, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the landing craft have a dual function to evacuate the wounded back. So they bring the troops in and then evacuate the wounded back out as floating ambulances almost.
But a lot of those drivers probably just try to get out of there
as quickly as possible.
And how do the British and Canadian beaches differ from the big cliff faces of Omaha, Utah and Pointe du Hoc?
Well, you're going straight into, on the British sector, you're going straight into coastal towns. So that brings its own problems. Fighting in built up areas, okay? Fighting street to street to street.
Yeah.
So you're off the beach, you've cleared the obstacles, you've cleared the minefields, the barbed wire, the machine gun placements, and now you're straight into street fighting, which has its own set of problems. But the British have trained for fighting in areas. They've got places like Imber on Salisbury Plain that they've trained with fighting through streets, and various other places as well.
So they're certainly prepared for that. But what do they actually come up against in terms of enemy resistance?
There's a whole mixture in there. So you've got, remember, with the Atlantic Wall, you've got it from Norway all the way to Spain. And you need troops in all sectors of that. You've got regular forces. You've got people coming back from rotation on the Eastern Front back to a cushy number in France. But also, you've got all sorts of other nationalities in there. So you've got war helper volunteers, as they're known as, Russian prisoners of war, all sorts of people from Eastern Europe are serving in the Wehrmacht.
Yeah, you hear these stories of the British troops encountering soldiers who don't speak German. They're speaking Russian or Lithuanian or Polish. It almost seems mental that Hitler would arm his Atlantic Wall with soldiers who were potentially POWs. But I guess it goes back to what you were saying. It's such an extensive area. He has no choice but to do that.
You've got to have people there guarding it, okay? They may not be the creme de la creme on the beaches, but then you've got the panzer divisions waiting in reserve behind, okay? And so they're like troubleshooters. So if the beach landing happens here, they'll send in the elite forces to that area.
After securing the beaches and fighting their way through rows of streets and coastal towns, with the threat of a counterattack always looming, the Allies' attention was focused on making as much ground as possible inland. For the British, the next major objective was to link up with the airborne troops of the British 6th, east of the Orne, before moving on towards Caen. This was accomplished by the early afternoon. To the west, the task of breaking out from the beaches into the countryside was proving more difficult, not least because of the unique terrain Allied soldiers found themselves in.
When reconnaissance planes flew over Normandy in the months and the weeks and days before Operation Overlord, an interesting topographical detail was highlighted. Aerial photography showed beyond the beaches several miles of farmland, all enclosed with hedgerows. Now, this wasn't a new discovery. In fact, it was well known that Norman farms weren't enclosed with wooden fences as they were in the UK and the US. But what the aerial photographs didn't show was the height of these hedgerows, sometimes 5 to 6 meters tall, 16, 17 feet, accompanied by earth banks, hills, creeks and low valleys. This bocage, as the French called it, created a defender's paradise.
What was a defender's paradise for the German soldiers was a nightmare for the US, British and Canadian forces moving inland. Despite reinforcements heading up the beaches in their thousands, the Allied armies remained ill-prepared and ill-equipped.
So Dickie, we've just secured the beachhead. We're heading our way inland. The job is not over.
Not by a long shot. We've now got to break out and push out into Normandy.
And we're facing a lot of enemy at this point. Does the resistance actually intensify as we go further and further inland?
Well, yeah, because you've got, Normandy is a fantastic place to defend. Hedgerows, sunken lanes, ideal for snap ambushes. So the key objectives here for the Allies are to break out of the beach zone, push inland, capture junctions, capture towns, capture bridges, but most importantly, capture any high ground you can get. If you can get any high ground, that will dominate the whole area. One key objective for the Allies is Hill 112. He who has 112 controls Normandy.
And so they have to push out as quickly as possible. They don't want to get penned in, and in order to do that you need to capture these key sort of logistical landmarks, don't you?
Yes.
But it's not easy, is it, considering the topography, shall we say, of Normandy, the bocage they call it. What exactly does that mean?
Bocage is a French term for, it's like a patchwork quilt of fields. Around these fields are high ancient hedgerows, vast, really tall, really thick, blackthorn, hawthorn, you know, really nasty kind of things to try and push you, dense things, really can't get through them.
Yeah, so the problem is it's difficult to get round these hedgerows. You don't want to be going through the sort of farmers' gates. It's going to be, they're going to be targeting those areas, but they're extremely difficult to get through. Tell me a bit about the Germans defending these areas. You called it sort of like it's almost a defender's paradise.
Yes.
What sort of things and traps were they laying for them? Why is it so difficult to get the Germans out of those areas?
Right, firstly, the Germans are using a lot more camouflage than we're using. Camouflage equipment, camouflage clothing, okay? They can blend into the background a lot easier, okay? Also, this pattern of hedgerows, you can set up a snap ambush in the next field, go to ground, and you'll have all of that area zeroed in. So if you come with your troops through the gate, the Germans might have that zeroed in.
They're going to have an MG42 on that,
straight on that thing. And so, golden rule with Normandy: don't go for the gate, go for the hedge, no matter how thick it is.
This was a task easier said than done. With little room for manoeuvre in these enclosures, Allied troops were, at all times, vulnerable to the dark arts of warfare. Anti-personnel mines laid down by German defenders.
So we've also got booby traps going on.
Right.
Take a look at this thing.
Oh yes, notorious.
What this is the German S-mine. These are a nasty piece of work, okay? Yeah. They're horrible. What you've got are these prongs sticking out of the ground. So you bury it in the ground up to this point. It's under the ground. You've also got these bits here, which you can attach tripwires to.
Okay, yeah.
So if you tread on that bit, or a vehicle goes over it, or you pull the tripwire attached to these, this thing is going to blast out of the ground about this sort of height.
Yeah, it's about hip height, isn't it?
Yes, about groin height, and detonate. Inside here, it's filled with hundreds of bits of metal, ball bearings, nasty stuff in there.
And it's intentional, isn't it, the height at which they explode? It's sort of made to blow off limbs and cause casualties that need to be dragged off the battlefield. It's nasty, isn't it?
It's designed as an anti-personnel weapon. It really is. Horrible. These hold up troops immensely. You've got to send the engineers in if you think you've got mines in there. This really slows everything down.
Exactly, it's another layer that the Allies have to think about. They have to get their engineers in, and that's why it takes so long for these troops. You know, the US troops try and capture Saint-Lô. It's supposed to take a week. It takes about 6 weeks, and it's all because of these booby traps, the camouflage, the hedgerows. So what do the Allies do to combat these obstacles? You know, they've got reinforcements coming in, of course.
Well, you've got every day, you've got new reinforcements coming in. So at the moment, I'm dressed in the uniform and equipment of the reinforcements. So what we've got here, the Coilies, the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry. They don't arrive on D-Day itself, they arrive on the 9th of June, a few days afterwards, and they're the reinforcements that come in. So you've got reinforcements coming in all the time. You've just got to plod your way through. Normandy isn't a quick campaign. It's not an easy victory. Every field has to be fought over. Every hedgerow has to be breached. One of the ways we're dealing with these hedgerows is on the front of the tanks. What they get are these Cullen cutters or rhino horns, and which are made out of recycled German sort of angle iron, German hedgehogs from the beach. They cut them off and just literally weld them to the front of the tanks, and so they can literally just push their way through the hedgerows.
So essentially what you're telling me is there's no easy solution. Despite these new designs and innovative techniques, at the end of the day, it's brute force and manpower.
Essentially, it's just hard soldiering and slog.
A campaign that was supposed to last 1 week, capturing the town of Saint-Lô, would take over a month and a half, with the German army inflicting large numbers of casualties and taking out hundreds of vehicles. Whilst the armies in the west struggled to break through the hedgerows, over to the east, the British army honed in on their next major objective, capturing the port city of Caen. Only 6 miles from Sword Beach, securing this city was critical if the Allied army was to push into the interior of France and move to its capital, Paris. And it needed to be taken quickly, before German reinforcements could flood in from the north and southeast.
The path to Caen primarily consisted of flat wheat fields, devoid of those nasty tall hedgerows that were giving the US Army in the West so many problems. But the British forces led by General Montgomery were facing their own problems. The 21st Panzer Division that had been stationed near Bayeux and had spent much of the morning of the 6th marching to and from Isigny under contradictory orders had finally mobilised, and by late afternoon it was ready to launch a counter-attack.
On the right flank of Sword Beach, the British and Canadian forces landing at Juno had failed to link up, creating a gap in the Allied advance, which Colonel Opeland, commanding the 22nd Regiment, looked to exploit. Just north of Caen, he was joined by the 192nd Panzer Grenadier Regiment, an elite unit well equipped with trucks, armoured personnel carriers and small arms. At 4 o'clock, Opeland was approached by General Marx, a hardened veteran and amputee of the Eastern Front. Opeland, he said, "If you don't succeed in pushing the British to the sea, we shall have lost the war. Press on to the coast." And with that order, it seemed the fate of the global conflict rested on the German commander's 98 tanks.
The Grenadiers led the thrust through the fields north of Caen with unbreakable determination, facing little opposition on the way. Nothing was going to stop them from getting to that beach, and that they did. At 2000 hours, having finally reached the coast, the Germans cried down their radios, "We've made it! We've made it!" Muttering amongst themselves, the Grenadiers were eagerly anticipating the arrival of their tanks. Together as a combined unit, there was no way that they could get dislodged from their position. But therein lay the problem. By the time the tanks started rolling, the Allies had been alerted, and with a plethora of anti-tank guns and tanks of their own, unbeknownst to the 22nd Panzer Regiment, they were about to run the gauntlet of fire.
It didn't take long before the lead tank took a direct hit and burst into a ball of flame. One by one, the others suffered the same fate. Within a few minutes, 5 of Opeland's best panzers had been blown up. Allied aircraft soon joined in. Lieutenant John Brown of the Royal Canadian Air Force was flying a Hawker Typhoon. His squadron began dropping bombs on the defenceless panzers.
And then we individually attacked the tanks, firing our cannons at them from all angles. They were sitting ducks.
And with that, Opeland was given no choice but to halt the advance. The operation had fizzled out, and the Grenadiers on the beach were left waiting for their tank support in vain. The gap in the Allied line still remained, but the Germans were simply incapable of exploiting it. foolish enough to leave their tank convoys without infantry support, the one opportunity to launch a counterattack on D-Day was missed.
As evening fell on the 6th of June 1944, 160,000 troops from Britain, Canada, the United States, France and other nations had landed. The beaches were not joined up for another week. Some objectives were not secured for another month as troops edged forward during brutal fighting. But the Allies finally had a foothold in northwest Europe. It had come at a great cost, although perhaps not as bad as many had feared. Regardless, 10,000 Allied troops were either killed or wounded, and 6,000 German soldiers lay dead by the end of the day. D-Day was over, but the battle was certainly not. Bitter fighting was to come as British forces struggled to secure Caen, and Allied armies pushed further inland to the south and west. For many soldiers, what they saw that day would stay with them forever. Some look back with an overwhelming sense of achievement and pride. Others with nothing other than horror and anguish.
As the light began to fade, Lieutenant John Reville of F Company, 5th Ranger Battalion, stood on the bluff at Omaha Beach. He called over his runner, Private Rex Lowe, and pointed out at the 6,000 vessels that he could see in front of him in the channel. "Take a look at this, Rex," he said. "You'll never see anything like this again in your life." On the horizon, reinforcements were arriving in their thousands in the form of fresh troops, equipment, vehicles of all kinds, artillery pieces, all protected by a morass of air balloons that choked the skyline. It truly would have been a sight to behold.
D-Day will live with me until the day I die, and I'll take it to heaven with me. It was the longest, most miserable, horrible day that I or anyone else went through. I wouldn't take $1 million for my experiences, but I surely wouldn't want to go through that again for $1 million.
It had been the greatest experience of my life. No matter what had happened, I had made it off that beach and reached the high ground. My contribution to the heroic tradition of the United States Army might have been the smallest achievement in the history of courage, but at least for a time, I had walked in the company of very brave men.